is here. Judgmentary, Judge Evans, good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We have Mr. Rios here. The Chief Justice is here. Good morning.
Hi.
And Judge, just so you know, we're now streaming live on YouTube.
Right.
And I believe we have Commissioner Covey here. Commissioner?
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Bet.
Good morning, Judge Moore. Long time no see. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you all too.
Hi.
Hey, Kelly, great to see you.
Hey, Missy, good to see you too. Long time.
I know.
And Chief Justice Raddick is just coming on. And then Megan, are there other folks who we're expecting, or is that it? That's it?
That is it.
Okay, then I will call the meeting to order. And Megan, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. The Honorable Sharon Keller.
Here.
Mr. Alex Bunnan.
Here.
The Honorable Valerie Covey.
Here.
The Honorable Brandon Creighton. The Honorable Richard Evans.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalo Rios.
Here.
The Honorable Nathan Hecht.
Here.
The Honorable Missy Maderi.
Here.
The Honorable Nicole Collier. The Honorable Reggie Smith. The Honorable Sherry Raddick.
Here.
The Honorable Vivian Torres. And the Honorable John Whitmire. Judge, we have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 17th and July 26th, 21 commission meetings?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. All right, next we have the chair's report. I don't have anything to report, so I'm going to pass it on to Jeff and ask for his report.
Sure, thank you, Judge. First, I want to give you a brief staff update. The sad news is Lindsay Bellinger, who'd been with us for a year and a half, is moving out of state and taking a job with LegalServer, a case management system. So we're going to miss Lindsay. And Claire Buteau, after 3.5 years with TIDC, and Claire, I think some of you may recall, she just won a State Bar Award for some of her writing. So big loss. Claire is going to be moving to New York, and we're going to miss her very much. So thank you, Claire, for all the time and the hard work that you put in here at TIDC. A little bit of good news. We're very fortunate to be joined by two people today. First is Bill Cox, who many of you know. He was the interim chief public defender with El Paso Public Defender Office and was with that office for about 25 years. So Bill in retirement is coming to work for TIDC, and we're very excited to have him here. He's just a font of knowledge for Texas Public Defense. So thank you, Bill. And we have Nick Sawyer joining us straight out of UT Law School. Nick is an intern at multiple public defender offices across the country and was the co-founder of UT Law School's Public Defense Interest Group for the students. So very good additions to TIDC. We're very excited about that. So again, welcome Bill and Nick. We're excited to have you all here. Quick update on Operation Lone Star. Again, just Operation Lone Star was launched in March, and in May, the governor declared a disaster. In June, the governor cleared out, I think, 950 beds, made those available at the Briscoe unit in order to house for persons who were arrested as part of Operation Lone Star. And then the governor's office asked OCA and TIDC if we could be helpful in the adjudication process and ensuring the right to counsel is met as part of Operation Lone Star. So we've been doing that for a couple of months now. The average number of arrests per day right now is hovering around 23 total. And we've been pretty involved, almost daily contact with OCA and the counties and other folks involved with Operation Lone Star. There was an issue that came up a few weeks ago, and that was there was an issue with visitation of clients. And there was a letter written by the ACLU, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and the Texas Fair Defense Project to TDCJ regarding that issue. TDCJ responded and said that they're working on fixing all of those issues and ensuring client visitation. And in the midst of that, just to remind you all, we had an emergency board meeting, and during that meeting, this board voted out approximately $450,000. Part of that going to the Lubbock Private Defender Office to serve kind of as a hub for indigent defense for Operation Lone Star. And part of that funding went to Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid to do direct representation. The big update I think that I have today is that this week the governor's office was able to fund TIDC $1.9 million to further assist with indigent defense costs in Operation Lone Star. That's a temporary kind of amount of money, and that's really just focused on ensuring the right to counsel in the coming weeks, maybe in the next month or two. And after that, the hope is that there could be additional funding for Operation Lone Star. So we'll certainly keep you posted on the additional funding. But in the meantime, because we received that $1.9 million this week, we will have some votes today that will be up regarding Operation Lone Star and continuing to fund indigent defense function for Operation Lone Star. The one really big note that I think is important for board members to know is that the Operation Lone Star funding, that $1.9 million, is all general revenue. It doesn't count against our budget appropriation. It's an entirely separate pot of money. So I think it's important to keep in mind as we go forward with that. So that's the news on Operation Lone Star. Lastly, I just wanted to keep you in the loop about Child Protective Services. The 86th legislative session, the legislature directed the Office of Court Administration to begin to track Child Protective Services data. The Office of Court Administration, you may remember, asked TIDC if we could help out with that and essentially kind of piggyback on our data collection efforts and making it easier for counties and auditors and other folks to report all of that data related to CPS cases. The first wave of data will come in November 1st, and we've been working very closely with the Office of Court Administration. And OCA is working on hiring somebody, a senior policy analyst, who will start in September, who will oversee all of that work and report in part to TIDC on that work. So that's my update. Again, exciting developments as far as staff, but certainly we're going to miss Claire. A lot of developments with Operation Lone Star and Child Protective Services. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions?
Not a question, but the office approached the Supreme Court about an emergency order to facilitate and enable operations in Operation Lone Star. And we immediately turned to the commission and were able to help any way that was necessary. But I think everything, you've been able to do everything you needed to do. But if it turns out not to be the case, why we certainly welcome your approach again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Nina has been really helpful from the Supreme Court. So we really enjoyed working with y'all.
Great. Okay, let's move on to policies and standards. Alex?
Yeah,
Is that-
so
Okay.
we have not met. We have no report, but there is a couple items. Indigent defense plan submission instructions. Is that Joel?
Wesley, thanks.
Oh,
Alex.
Wesley, I'm sorry.
No worries. Sorry, we didn't go over this beforehand. This is on page 10 of your book, and it's a pretty simple report. The legislature didn't make any changes this past session that require specific changes to the indigent defense plans. As you know, they're required to be submitted by November 1st, following each legislative session year. So there are no recommended changes to the requirements for those plans, and the plan is to collect the changes and updates that the judges have to them using our traditional Public Policy Research Institute website. And just to piggyback on what Jeff said, we are though also working on developing a new portion of this for reporting of judicial plans on child protection cases. We are expecting a relatively bare bones initial submission. but we'll be presenting that to the Judicial Council tomorrow. And our new senior policy analyst that's going to be starting next month, we're super excited. Crystal Leff-Pignon has deep understanding and experience in this area, is really going to help us develop that over the coming 2 years for the subsequent submissions. And then I will be doing the next report, Alex, if that's okay, on complaints. That's the next 2 pages in the meeting book. And I want to thank publicly Lindsay Bellinger, who left last week, but before she did, she completed this report, and I'm going to be giving it, I'll say, on her behalf for the moment. Since the last board meeting, we've had 27 new complaints. And of those, there's 4 that are particularly relevant to the operations of indigent defense systems, which are, of course, the ones that are most important for the commission to receive. One alleging a denial of payment to an investigator who was appointed on to assist a defendant. Another one from Lavaca County that alleges the county attorney is approaching and encouraging defendants to resolve their cases directly and not requesting counsel and filling out an affidavit of indigence to request counsel. One in Ector County, really alleging a number of different problems related to the indigent defense system, but a lot of them related to poor representation, lack of investigation by defense attorneys that are appointed to represent clients there. And last one in Milam County, that is where the judge is encouraging folks to speak with a prosecutor and that there's going to be a plea offer and that they might be able to work something out. And we think that may be a violation of a provision of the Code of Criminal Procedure. As to an update on the complaint process, this was one thing that Lindsay, as she left, and based on the discussion at the last meeting, she's given us a blueprint of some issues and some things to think about. So she did a pretty comprehensive evaluation of the 2 years that she has been handling complaints. We received them by mail, email, phone, and we've now created a hidden web form on our website where we can direct folks who call, for instance, with a complaint to collect all the relevant information and really help put together these reports to the board each meeting. Complaints have really increased. We've had 232 in the last 2 years, whereas the year before that, it was only 55. I realize that's 2 years versus 1 year, but nonetheless, you can see it's a pretty marked increase. So it's a big, 2/3 of them are within our scope. And she found about 20% were not, and the rest were on the border. And about half the complaints deal with representation by court-appointed counsel. So we list a whole variety of the types of complaints about the level of representation, but many of them are directly on point for our work. And they do get factored into our risk assessment. It's a relatively small part of determining who gets on-site monitoring. And besides issues with court-appointed counsel, there have been some complaints about caseloads, high caseloads, and some related to the pandemic, a little more specific. And the last section, she has some thoughts on how we might proceed, and we'll be working with a new staff to consider ways to improve the process. One option would be to expand access to the process, which would be perhaps putting a public link on our website to file complaints. The upside is we'd obviously get more complaints. We'd hear more about what is actually happening out there, give us opportunities to provide technical assistance. The downside is it could overwhelm our ability to respond to complaints. So it's a double-edged issue, and we're not, right now, we haven't decided what we want to recommend to the board, but that's where we're at on that decision. And part of that thought behind that would be to provide more direct information to the public and potential complainants about what our scope is, what we can do, and really to perhaps automate some of the responses, because a lot of these things we do have a relatively standard response for referrals to other agencies that may be relevant. And if we could automate some of that, it might make it more feasible to have a more publicly accessible complaints link. But so right now we don't have any recommendations to change the policy, but this is just some of the starting points. And obviously, if any of the members have feedback or suggestions, we'd be open to hear that, obviously, and we'll bring something back to you in future meetings. And that's it.
Wesley, did I miss something or is there a motion to direct staff to publish? Weren't we supposed to address a motion to direct staff to publish the indigent defense plan submission instructions?
Yes, ma'am. I forgot. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I thought it just went over my head. Okay. Is there a motion to direct staff to publish the indigent defense plan submission instructions?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, last thing is policy monitoring.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin.
Okay.
Yes, if you could, continuing on to page 13, I have a summary of recent policy monitoring activity. Since our board meeting in June, we've issued one report to Montgomery County. We've received county responses from both Harris and Montgomery County. Both of these county responses address the findings we made in those reports. Since the Harris review, we've begun a new practice. We've now done the Q&A sessions through a video conference with stakeholders. We believe having these video conferences helps communicate the contents of the report and helps counties respond to the report findings appropriately. We intend to continue to do this, at least with large reviews. Since COVID began, we've attempted to do our reviews virtually. The only places where we have been able to do this 100% virtually are in Harris and Montgomery counties. With other counties, we've had to do at least some on-site work. We have now 7 pending reports, which we haven't yet issued, but we've done on-site work in 5 of those counties, and we will be able to issue those reports shortly. We have 2 other counties, Tom Green and Taylor. Staff will go to those counties in September, and we should be able to issue those reports after that. Continuing on to page 14, we have some upcoming follow-up monitoring reviews, first in Maverick and Zavala counties, and then in Collin County. With Collin County, there's only one finding that's outstanding, and I'm very confident that the county will address this with this follow-up review. With Maverick and Zavala counties, there's some more systemic issues. These are our longest outstanding reviews. They're part of the same district courts region, especially with Maverick County. They have a lot of requests for counsel, but there are very few appointments. So as I mentioned, we began these reviews in 2008. So they've been open for a long time. There are very few appointments in Maverick County. This is a county with a population of more than 50,000 people. They typically are the lowest per capita spending county for indigent defense in Texas. Last year, their per capita spending was 32 cents. The year before, it was less than $1. Statewide, it's between $9 and $10. We've attempted over the last 2 years to meet with the judges on many occasions, and we've been unsuccessful until this last Friday. Jeff and I had a Zoom call with all of the trial court judges. I think it went very successfully. They understood the importance of meeting our requirements, and they were very open to doing whatever it took to meet those requirements. However, if we do not see some significant improvements, we may have to come back to you to see if we need to withhold some grant funding. That concludes my report. If there's no questions, I would like to turn it to Claire Buteau to talk about policy monitoring improvements.
Okay, Claire.
Thanks, Joel. So yes, I'll be giving an update on our policy monitoring improvements process, and this is the last item in our policies and standards report. This is a process that we've been undergoing since 2018, and we had a couple goals in mind. First was to standardize our reports so that we could aggregate our findings across reports. And the second was to expand monitoring to include monitoring quality of counsel. So for the first part, aggregating findings, we've completed a preliminary review of our reports going back to 2006. There have been 113 reports on 70 counties in that time. And what we found is that the major areas for Fair Defense Act noncompliance are core requirement 1, which is prompt magistration, and core requirement 4, which is prompt appointment of counsel. Most of the counties we have reviewed have had non-compliance findings in those areas. So we're continuing to evaluate these preliminary results and developing recommendations for next steps. For the second part, we've been piloting measures of quality of counsel and examining counties' procedures for evaluating attorney performance. We've issued 7 reports so far and have more underway. Most counties we found do not have systems for monitoring key measures like caseloads, investigation, and client communication. As with the report aggregation, we're continuing to evaluate our findings and continue our pilot through the end of this year and develop more recommendations for next steps. So that concludes my report.
Claire, before you go, I don't know if you're going to be giving another report later, but I want to thank you on behalf of the commission for everything you've done since you've been here. You've really added a lot to the program, and we wish you good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Improvement team report.
That's me.
Scott.
Thanks, Judge Keller. So if y'all can turn to page 16 and 17, you'll see the improvement team report. Kathleen and I have been heavily involved in TIDC's response to Operation Lone Star, including developing the budgets, legal memos, been in constant contact with Val Verde County officials, OCA, the Lubbock Private Defender's Office. Kathleen and I were heavily involved in developing some fact sheets, public communications, and the application form for the Operation Lone Star attorney panel. That has gone live at this point. So there are private attorneys from around the state who are applying to be on that panel through the Lubbock Private Defender's Office website right now. We've also been providing technical assistance for the new public defender offices in Max that y'all recently gave grant funding to in June and even before that. Kathleen has continued her work in developing the Future Indigent Defense Leaders program, the mentoring program that we're working with the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, Harris County Public Defender's Office on, and Gideon's Promise. You will see later on in the program today, you'll be voting on some funding to bring Gideons to Texas. And so Kathleen has been heavily involved in that effort and setting up that new phase of the program. The Juvenile Training Immersion program, you may recall, is a project that we got some grant funding from Department of Justice for, and we've been working with the National Juvenile Defender Center on that. It's a train the trainer program. The trainers have been trained, and we have set upcoming dates for training juvenile defenders around the state, and you'll see that on at the top of page 17. We have a training set up for Austin in October, Houston, October, El Paso in November, Lubbock, November 19th, Dallas in February of next year, and McAllen in February of next year. Our Investigator Project, another program that is funded with some Department of Justice funding. We're partnering with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and other groups, National Center for State Courts, to look at the use of investigators in Texas, and they will be developing some recommendations for us that will that should be coming out next year. So we've been doing additional planning with NACDL on that. We've done a number of trainings and presentations. I presented to the Texas Municipal Courts Education Center on appointment of counsel. Kathleen did a presentation to the Rural Externship Program at SMU Law School, and we just had a forensic strategic plan listening session with mental health defenders that was put on with Health and Human Services. And that's about it. I guess the last thing we did, we've been continuing to work with the chief public defenders, putting on monthly programs for them, and that included a half-day program. We had an in-person meeting at Rusty Duncan. So that about wraps it up for the improvement team.
Thank you, Scott. Alex, is that it for policies and standards? I think it is.
It is.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Judgmentary, grants and reporting.
All right, thank you, Judge Keller. So as Judge Keller knows, we all met on August 12th, and we discussed many of the different grants. So I guess I'm turning it over to Edwin at this time.
Sure, Judge. I'll walk us through this part of the agenda. Thank you. If you turn to page 18 in your meeting materials, you'll see the standard report that Sharon presents regarding the flow of revenue into the Fair Defense account. If you can scroll down just a little bit there. So there's a lot of data there that shows the collections into the Fair Defense account over the last 3 years, so you can see trends. But really the big takeaway is that the impact of COVID, those two asterisks at the bottom of the sheet are the things to take away. The impact of COVID on revenue into the Fair Defense account is definitely waning, and we are seeing lots of improvement. So the court collection impact is a kind of lagging indicator of where we are with the COVID stuff, but it's we had a $5.8 million decrease in revenue in FY20 and only an additional $1.4 million in 21. So we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and fully expect that recovery trend to continue. And we still have a substantial amount of funding in the Fair Defense account over what has been appropriated to TIDC. So in terms of revenue, we remain in a solid position. On page 19, we see the budget update for the previous fiscal years that still have remaining grant obligations in place. And again, we are just showing some of the closeout and carry forward from the previous budget years. That number at the bottom is the one I would draw your attention to, which is that we have been planning and budgeting to use some of our remaining funds from FY20 and FY21 to help us cover the next biennium. And when we get to the next page, I'll kind of walk through how that budgeting is going to work. But all the funds that have been unobligated are being carried forward to meet the award obligations that the commission has already adopted, and we remain in good shape to cover all of our existing awards. The next page is page 20, and this has our standard budget to actuals update, as well as a projection of where we expect the final FY21 budget to land, as well as an FY22 proposed budget in the second to the last column for your consideration today. We will be asking you to adopt a budget for FY22. And then the very last column on the right is our FY23 projected. And the reason that's included here is because TIDC's funding is biennial from the legislature. We think it's important to see the biennial picture because in some years we do have the ability within a biennium to carry forward unexpended balance within the biennium, but not across biennia. So I included that.
Let me interrupt you.
Yes.
I don't see that in the meeting book. What page is it?
This was in the revised meeting book on page 20.
Well, maybe.
Judge Keller, there was a new one that went out about an hour ago, so maybe it's in your...
Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay.
Just we had a lot of late breaking issues with the OLS grants and trying to work with the program. So
okay, I can see it on the screen. That's fine.
I apologize.
Yeah, we apologize. Anyway. That's not late last night because of we received the governor's funds just about 48 hours ago.
I printed out the one from last night. Does everybody else have it on page 20? That's fine. Just move. We can go ahead.
So the main what the grant, or rather what the proposed budget for FY22 in the second to the last column is based on is it shows the awards that have already been adopted by the commission at the June meeting, and I've carried forward those grant obligations for those grants that are multi-year sustainability grants to show where we would be in the second year of the biennium. So those grants are reflected here. I'll remind you all that a big part of our appropriation, $5 million for the biennium from the legislature, was restricted for mental health defender programs. And so we've awarded some of those already, but we have some budget remaining that is restricted for additional mental health public defenders or managed assigned counsel programs. So that is reflected as well. The amounts in green reflect the amounts that are being presented today for your approval. If you were to accept all of the staff recommendations that we're presenting today regarding new funding or modifications of grants, then the impact is reflected there in the light green numbers. And then the amounts that are highlighted in blue show how we use the unobligated funds within the biennium to cover our full obligations across the 2 years of the biennium. So we would have about $3.7 million that would not be expended during the FY22 year, but that we would need to hold in reserve and carry forward to the second year of the biennium in order to cover the obligations. The significant change here beyond the proposed new grants that are going to be considered today is formula grant funding. So last year, our formula grant program was funded at $22 million. The staff recommendation, which was endorsed by the Grants and Reporting Committee at our meeting on the 12th of June, is to fund the formula grant program this year at $20.5 million. That amount is obviously a reduction, but its impact is somewhat mitigated. There are 38 counties, if we did adopt that formula grant budget for the year, that would be entirely unaffected. Mostly the smallest counties. And 180 counties of the 254 in Texas would see decreases of less than $2,000 in their formula grant award. The average decrease for those counties experiencing it would be 3.49, about 3.5% lower. The reason that we've presented that as our recommendation is because it's, we've been getting a lot of guidance and feedback from legislature about the investments that TIDC makes that really lead to improvements. And this level of budgeting, I think, has minimal impact on the counties and will allow us to move forward on some of the very good projects that we have in the pipeline that we've been developing over the last several years. So we do have a motion from the committee, but I think that we may want to hold off on your consideration. Of course, we can take it in any order you would like, but since we have a number of proposed grants that would impact perhaps your decision here, we thought perhaps you would want to just lay this issue out and then consider the proposed spending in the grants and modifications before making a final decision.
Judgmentary, is that what you want to do?
Yeah, that sounds fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me pause here and just ask if there are any questions before we move on.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Valerie Covey.
Sure.
So I think what you've just laid out is that because we didn't spend it all before, we're moving that money forward to this next year and allowing us, even though our formula grant money is less, allowing us to do more. Is that what I'm seeing here?
Well, let's see if I'm following your question. The carry forward within the next biennium that's proposed here is really just kind of a cash flow proposal that allows us to kind of even out some of our obligations over the 2 years. The amounts in green, which reflect the new spending that we're proposing today, is let me back up. The amount of formula funding that is proposed would readily accommodate the new spending that is proposed today and reflects a minor kind of reallocation between investments and improvement and subsidizing existing county programs. Does that help?
Let me ask this then. The reason that the proposal is less than that we're proposing reducing the formula grant is because we have obligations from 2019 that we can't pay out of 2019 and we have to pay out of current funds. Is that right?
Well, that's part of the issue. We'll discuss that in more detail in a moment. We do need to do some housekeeping in terms of moving some of the older grants forward that weren't able to be completed in FY19 because of comptroller rules regarding previous budget years. There's a limit to how long we can keep those obligations open. So I would say that that's part of it, and part of that impact is reflected in the green numbers, the numbers that we're proposing for you to approve today. The other part of it is the modifications and the new grants that are being proposed today, which we're going to go through one by one. So yes, I think it's partly related to the need to bring forward some and reissue some of those older grant obligations in the current biennium, and it's partly new spending and grant modifications.
So, so Edwin, if we haven't spent it all in the prior years, we can roll it forward, is what you're saying, I think, and to some extent, and so some of that may be reflected here in these numbers. And the blue numbers, it looks like in 22 improvement grants for future year obligations, we're rolling it into 23. It looks like.
Right.
And so maybe you could make sure that I'm seeing that right. And then we've got the green numbers that are new proposals we're about to go into detail and talk about. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if you agreed with all the staff recommendations, those new numbers would remain there. And if you accept some and decline some, those numbers would be lower.
And if all of the grants, grant funds proposed and on the books are spent by the counties, then we would have 601,000 left. Is that accurate?
That's right. There would be, looking at the biennium in total, we estimate about $600,000 that would be unbudgeted. That's the cushion. We try not to budget right up to the line of our spending authority because of various unknowns. But yeah, so this proposal reflects about $600,000 that would be remain available.
And at the beginning of our discussion, I believe Jeffrey was talking about additional funds that were made available to us.
Right.
Are these reflected here on this sheet at all?
No, so this would reflect just the TIDC appropriation that is, I guess I would characterize as our normal funding stream, our normal appropriation from the legislature. So everything that we're proposing and discussing related to Operation Lone Star will be budgeted and funded separately through funding that has been provided directly from the Office of the Governor. I believe the source of funds was some type of emergency account that was available to them. And we have some additional information about that later in the book, that when we consider the Operation Lone Star grants that we're proposing. One of the bits of, I guess, instruction that we got regarding our involvement with the Operation Lone Star program was that the intention was that that they wanted to provide the funding to address those new needs from the counties and cover it directly with new funds. And so we've basically segregated that, and that is not reflected here.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? So I guess we could move on to the next, excuse me. On page 23, this really just kind of recaps what Judge Maderi mentioned about the Grants and Reporting Committee meeting, page 23. There were a number of, I'm sorry, I skipped a page. Page 22, quick formula grant update. We have a small handful of counties that where we're still holding back formula funding from FY21 because the counties have some outstanding reports to OCA primarily that are required. These are the reports filed by the clerks. I think we're still seeing a little bit of hangover from COVID in terms of folks being behind. We're working with all these counties, and we fully expect together with OCA to be able to address these issues. I just want to give you a quick update that there are a handful where we're still trying to address these backlogs in documents and reports that are outstanding. Okay, sorry about that. Now on page 23 is just a little bit more detail about what the Grants and Reporting Committee considered when they met on the 12th of August. The committee is chaired by Judge Maderi, of course. Other members are Judge Keller and Chief Justice Raddick. and we considered a number of different proposals. Unfortunately, so we got a lot of business done, and I think that the items that we vetted and worked with the committee on in detail, and where we have a committee motion, we're going to try to address those a little more quickly today. And then there were a handful of items where we lost a quorum. Judge Maderi had an emergency meeting of the presiding judges that she had to step out for, which we totally understand. But so we weren't able to get through all of the business that we had hoped to address. So we'll take those up with the full board here today, the ones that we didn't cover in the meeting. So that's just a quick recap of the committee meeting. And I think we can dive into the grant request that I was mentioning earlier. The first one is from Burnett County for a rural regional public defender. And I believe Scott Ehlers is going to lay this out.
Yes, thanks, Edwin. So Burnett County is requesting just over $1 million for this coming year to expand their operations to serve Llano County and Blanco County. Llano County recently lost their contract attorney, and so they desperately need someone to cover those cases that are still coming in. And Blanco County, I think y'all know, is a rapidly expanding county that is getting more cases and needs additional support and attorneys. So this proposal calls for expanding the Burnett County Public Defender's Office. It's going to be called the North Hill Country Regional Public Defender Office now. They'll have a chief, 5 felony attorneys, 2 misdemeanor attorneys, and a juvenile attorney. And so, yeah, that's about the extent of the description. Once again, staff has been working with Burnett and these other counties for a couple of years now. We recommend this expansion. We think it's a good idea. It's a quick way to expand their operations into these other counties, improve quality, and yeah, that's about it. So the Grants and Reporting Committee did adopt a motion to recommend funding for the North Hill Country Regional Public Defender.
So Judge Maderi, if we don't need a second, if you want to call that motion, or perhaps there's discussion. I don't mean to get ahead of ourselves.
Okay. Is there any...
Sorry, Judge. I did want to mention that Michelle Moore, the Chief Public Defender, is here. If any of y'all had any questions, I don't. Judge Oakley, I was going to make it. I don't think I see him, but Michelle is here. If y'all have any questions for her.
Anyone have any questions or any discussion? All right. Do you want me to call for that motion then on committee motion to award FY22 improvement grant of, is that the one I'm on with Burnett County for the North Hill County?
Yeah. I think, Judge, you present it and I call for the vote.
I think that's correct, Judge.
Okay. So you presented the committee motion. Is there, and no second is necessary. And the committee motion is to award new FY22 improvement grant of $1,063,224 to Burnett County for the North Hill Country Regional Public Defender Office. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you, Judge. The next item is on page 25 of your meeting materials, and it's a small grant request from Navarro County for a single-year request for the county to implement the TechShare Indigent Defense software system. As you all know, we helped to develop this through grant funds with several of our county partners. It's a very good program that helps counties stay in compliance with the Fair Defense Act. The Grants and Reporting Committee did endorse this, and we do have a committee motion. The grant would be up to $15,000 for Navarro County to implement that award or implement that system.
Okay. Is there, I think we'll do this better when we're not on Zoom. There's a committee motion to award the FY22 improvement grant of up to $15,000 to Navarro County for the implementation of TechShare Indigent Defense software system. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is on page 26 of your meeting book. This was also vetted and endorsed by the Grants and Reporting Committee. Grant request from Kendall County for an Indigent Defense Coordinator. Kendall County is part of the Hill Country Regional Public Defender Office that we created in FY21. The program's gotten off to a good start. It's been very successful, but in the course of implementing the new public defender program, some gaps in Kendall County's front-end indigent defense processes and appointment processes were identified. They really need an indigent defense coordinator to make sure that they're complying with all those Fair Defense Act timelines and make sure that the system is operating appropriately. I think it's a very good program, and we do have a committee motion on this as well, which is number.
You want me to read that, Sharon? Committee motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Committee motion to award new FY22 improvement grant of $53,512 to Kendall County to establish the Indigent Defense Coordinator Program.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you all. The next item is on page 27. It's a request from Harris County, but it's actually a statewide program. This is the next iteration, next generation, if you will, of our FIDL program. And I believe Jeff is going to lay this out for us. Jeff?
Sure, thank you, Edwin. So we're pretty excited about this one. As you may recall, the Future Indigent Defense Leaders has been around for a couple of years now, and it's gotten really good press and more importantly, really good results. A lot of that was unfortunately derailed a little bit by COVID, but starting to get back on track now. You might recall that the goal, even 2-3 years ago when we first laid this out, was to eventually bring this program entirely to Texas instead of having to send people out of state. This would accomplish that goal. This is for 2 different cohorts for the Future Indigent Defense Leaders Program, and we're upping the number of people who would be able to attend. Additionally, the Gideon's Promise, one of the partners in the program, secured a matching grant for $500,000 from the Arnold Arnold Ventures now about the grant match and excited about the program. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Just this, Valerie. So this is to train people or to encourage people to want to be criminal defense lawyers? Can you give me just a brief history?
Sure, Commissioner. Yeah, basically it's a kind of leadership and training and mentoring program that we've had for a few years now, and we've partnered with the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, Harris County, and Gideon's Promise. So essentially this is taking young defense attorneys, usually within 5 years of practice, and they go through pretty rigorous training focused on public defense, and they're mentored by Texas criminal defense lawyers. The one thing that we've had in the past that that I'm kind of happy that we're tweaking a little bit is that we partner with Gideon's Promise, and most of their training has taken place in Atlanta previously. So we were sending people out of state to train them in Atlanta and to go through the training out there. What I like about what we're doing now is that training would happen here in Texas, out in the Hill Country. So that's one of the big improvements in addition to that matching grant from the Arnold Ventures.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And this one, we didn't get we lost our quorum, so we don't have a committee motion, but we do have a motion on the sheet if there's discussion.
Okay, is there a motion to award a new FY22 improvement grant award of $189,057 to Harris County for the Future Indigent Defense Leaders Statewide Training and Mentoring Program?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
This Valerie, I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries too.
And I abstain.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
I think
Well, can I
Chief
just say
Justice
that,
Braddock did.
can I interrupt? Excuse me. This is statewide. It's not, they're just the host, Harris County, and that's why I didn't abstain.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Raddick.
Okay, thank you. The next item begins on page 32 of your meeting materials. This is a grant request from Potter County, and Jeff is also going to lay this out for you.
Thank you, Edwin. We are especially excited about this one. We've been working with Potter County for over 3 years now toward a public defender office. They had a large study by the Sixth Amendment Center about some of the issues with their indigent defense provision in Potter County. And we worked with them very closely for several years. You may recall that Potter County has applied for TIDC funding in the past for a public defender office. And our staff recommendation at that time was to not fund that program because there was still a lot of work that needed to be done. We're very happy to say that that program has come a long way, that we worked with them closely. And now I think they have a project that we're very excited about and happy to recommend. It's a combined public defender and managed assigned counsel program that will cover Potter and Armstrong counties. Between the PD office and the MAC, it would cover 100% of the indigent defense cases in those two counties. We think that if this goes well, which we think that it might, this program might expand to additional counties in the region, and I think that'd be a very good thing. One thing I just want to note real quick, normally we do an 80, 60, 40, 20 grant. So what that means is we fund 80% the first year, 60% the second, and so on. This would be a 50, 50, 50, 50. So essentially the same amount of money, but we'd fund 50% each year of the grant program. One of the reasons that I think the staff recommendation really is to go in that direction is it fits in a little bit better with our funding obligations with other improvement grants right now, and kind of eases that path. So that's Potter. We're very excited about it. It's been, like I said, several years in the making. Planning studies from TIDC and many presentations and flying out to Potter County to meet with the county officials out there. So excited to recommend this one, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Jeff, I just have a housekeeping question, and I might be incorrect on that, but I thought that this came out with a committee motion. Is that not correct?
Not correct, only because I think that the committee wanted to recommend it, but we asked that there not be a vote just yet because we were still waiting on a couple of documents.
Okay.
But we have those in hand now, and I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Just a question. I'm sorry, this Commissioner Covey. You mentioned the 50-50. Is that something that the committee has looked at to do with other grants or just this one? Is this like in the future we might consider this funding model or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've done that just on occasion when counties have asked for something like that. So we did that, for instance, with the Travis County Public Defender Office, maybe one or two more. I think the Harris County office years ago, I think we did an 80-80, 20-20. But essentially that it kind of, we're over the course of 4 years in some way, TIDC is funding 50%, kind of half of the cost. So sometimes it's been kind of at the request of the county. Here, it's partially at the request of the county and partially on the advice of TIDC staff, because it just really fits in a little bit better with our funding structure, and kind of eases the obligations over 4 years. And so basically, instead of fronting that money, the 80% in the first year, it kind of lowers our initial investment, and then so yeah, it's a good question.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a motion to award a new FY22 improvement grant of $446,923 to Potter County to establish the Public Defender Managed Assigned Counsel program serving Potter and Armstrong counties?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second. This is Gonzalo.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all. I'd direct you now to page 42 of your meeting materials. This touches on one of the issues of the previous budget year grants. And really the next handful of items I would regard as largely housekeeping items regarding existing grants. So page 42 summarizes several grants that were issued out of the FY19 budget year that are still open. And the Texas Comptroller has budget rules that require a budget year to be closed out after 3 years. In most circumstances, this is not an issue for us because we readily get the grant obligations spent well before we run into such a limit. In this case, there were a handful of programs that had some very significant delays related to almost exclusively, but not exclusively related to COVID-19. So there were a number of pending balances in some of these old FY19 awards. So we're proposing here is to simply move those forward into a future budget year and reissue where necessary. So in a couple of the motions, we're reissuing the unspent balance of the award, since most of them have been partially claimed. And then in the case of the Managed Assigned Counsel program, it's really just a budget adjustment on our part in the current biennium to allocate funds out of the current biennium to cover the expiring obligation from FY19. So we do have some motions on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Edwin. So I assume that because we didn't spend the money, it stayed in the bucket in the account, and then we just are rolling it forward. So it's not taking away from any other grant opportunities in the current year because we have not spent it. We're just rolling it forward to this program.
Well, I would say
right?
that's mostly right in the sense that the amounts that were not able to be expended out of FY19 that were obligated out of FY19 remain in the Fair Defense account. They are part of our general revenue dedicated fund that can only be spent on indigent defense. As you know, the legislature in recent years has not given us full spending authority of that account, which we used to have. So it is the case that this does have an impact in the sense that when we reissue or move the remaining balance of these grants forward, it does reduce our spending authority in the current biennium. We do have a number of funds, substantial funds that were left in this current biennium. This was part of our effort to kind of shepherd the grant obligations that we have across biennia by sort of holding some funds in reserve. So it does have an impact it does count against our spending authority in the current biennium, but there are substantial unobligated funds in the current biennium to cover it.
Is there a reason why they were not able to spend all the money in the appropriate time period? And do you expect that to be resolved this time?
Yes, the two of the grants here are related to the Future Indigent Defense Leaders Program, or the FIDDLE program, which was the first couple of iterations of our statewide indigent defense training and mentoring program. Those are awards that are kind of hosted by Harris County for those statewide programs. And the kind of bulk of those programs is that we send the participants and some of the mentors through a training program with Gideon's Promise, which is kind of the leading national public defender training institute. And that program actually extends out over 3 years. So what happens is they go for an intensive 2-week institute, and then they return for a week, what they call a weekend institute, I think 4 times every 6 months. So it's a very kind of long arc to go through that program. COVID hit that hard and really shut it down completely. So those awards are exclusively related to COVID, and we have worked with them to map out a schedule for when these events are going to actually take place. But the big institute is really kind of a once a year thing. The other two are we funded part of Harris County's Managed Assigned Counsel program out of 19, even though that was an FY20 award. This is the budget modification. They, I think, had a lot of recruiting challenges and just challenges getting off the ground related to COVID. So I would chalk that up also to COVID. And then the last one is related to our statewide Padilla compliance program, which was a grant to Hayes County to basically host a statewide remote Padilla consulting program. This is related to immigration, collateral consequences related to immigration matters in criminal cases, and complying with the Supreme Court ruling in Padilla. That program, really, the usage was lower than we thought. The demand for those services really depends on educating defense lawyers about what these obligations are that they're under, and there's a surprising gap between their understanding of their obligations and what their actual obligations are. So that was just underutilized initially. But we've been working closely with the program to make sure that that defense attorneys are better educated about their obligations, and they've seen an increase in demand for their services, which is starting to spend that grant more quickly. So that's kind of a high level overview of why we had these delays in getting those grant funds used up.
I appreciate that. I'm sure you're monitoring those as we go through the biennium too.
Yes, I feel very good about these problems largely being addressed, and now we just have to kind of, update these awards, and they're on track to finish out as intended.
All right. Anything else? So I guess there's a committee. Can you all hear me? It's really, I've got horrible feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Committee motion to terminate the FY19 awards to Harris County for the statewide Indigent Defense Mentoring and Training Program, and award of a new FY22 technical support grant for $609,567 and $16 with term through July 2024.
Thank you, Judge. Any discussion?
I'll do better next time.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
I abstain.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. Next item is on page 43. We have committee motions on the next several, so I'll try to go through them quickly. Denton County received a TIDC grant this year for an indigent defense coordinator team. It's a large urban county with a number of municipalities and a complex system regarding front-end processes for indigent defense. The county made an error when it submitted its budget for the program. There was basically some of the amounts that were for fringe benefits, health insurance type costs were not extended out for the full staff footprint. So we're recommending that we modify the FY22 improvement grant to Denton to $254,999 to correct that math error in the application process. And we have a committee motion for that.
Judgmentary?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time seeing that. Is it 8-1 or 8D?
No, did we do 8? We need to do 8 if we have number 10.
Okay,
Yeah,
somebody highlight it. It's number 10, committee motion to terminate the FY19 award to Hayes County for the statewide remote Padilla compliance program and award of a new FY22 technical support grant for $233,682.34 with a term through FY 2024.
And I apologize, everyone, that there are actually 3 motions related to the FY19 issue. This is the second of those. I jumped ahead too quickly. I apologize. So
Okay.
this is the second item of 3 regarding the FY19 updates.
And there is a committee motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then the next one is number 11, Judgmentary.
I got it. I'm on.
Okay.
Committee motion to reallocate available FY20 and FY21 TIDC funds to cover the expiring FY19 funds previously obligated for the FY20 Harris County Misdemeanor Managed Assigned Counsel grant.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay.
Thank you.
And-
Now we're on motion number 12, which is the Denton County issue that I just laid out.
All right, so committee motion to increase the FY22 improvement grant to Denton County by $31,200 to $254,991 based on a revised total program budget of $318,739.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries too.
Thank you. Page 44 of your meeting book, another routine grant modification. El Paso is going to need $13,000 less for the program than they thought. We're just going to free it up. We have a committee motion to reduce their award for the 48-hour bond review program by $13,252.
All right, committee motion to reduce the FY22 improvement grant to El Paso County for the 48-hour bond review program by $13,252 to $204,025 based on a revised total program budget of $408,049.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all. So we're moving now to page 45 of the meeting materials, and this is a request to modify our award for the Regional Public Defender Office for capital cases. And I believe Jeff is going to lay that out for us.
Thank you, Edwin. So I think most people are familiar with the Regional Public Defender Office for capital cases. It's been around about 13 years at this point, and it provides death penalty representation in 185 counties across Texas. By rule, the largest 14 counties aren't involved, but the other 240 counties are eligible. Again, out of those 240, 185 have participated. For a few years now, TIDC has funded 2/3 of RPDO's budget. For most of its history, though, RPDO was a Lubbock County agency. And as you can imagine, being a Lubbock County agency that was serving 185 counties, having employees who neither live nor work in Lubbock County posed a lot of problems over time. Problems regarding benefits and liability and salaries and things like that. Most of those problems we were able to solve with the help of Jim Allison by creating a local government corporation. And so now that RPDO is no longer a Lubbock County agency, it is a local government corporation. It has basically the similar or close to the same board that it had previously, providing similar or same services as it provided previously. But we just don't have a lot of those issues that kind of came along with a single kind of mid-sized county hosting a 185 county program. The one issue that it remains, though, is that RPDO was never a really good fit for Lubbock County salary structure. You can imagine having a bunch of attorneys and investigators and mitigation specialists who are exclusively doing death penalty work, trying to fit into a salary structure that's really meant for folks who are doing misdemeanors or low-level felonies and things like that. So for its history, most of its history, RPDO has had no salary structure. Really, it's been ad hoc. And that's presented a lot of problems over time with attracting and retaining, especially attorneys, but I would say mitigation specialists and investigators and other staff as well. Going back a couple of years before that transition to a local government corporation, Judge Kelly Moore, who at the time was the chair of RPDO, created a committee to review the salary structure. We learned very quickly, I was part of that committee, and we learned very quickly from Lubbock County Commissioner Bill McKay that it really didn't matter what that committee proposed. Lubbock County just wouldn't be able to take any action on that salary structure. They're kind of bound by their own salary structures. Now I'm kind of flash forward a couple years. We've got RPDO as a local government corporation, and the new chair created a salary committee to take a look at this issue again. We met for several months. We looked at comparable salaries at a bunch of different places. And some of them you see in your meeting notebook. We have comparable salaries from the Attorney General's office, where looking at the attorneys who handle death penalty cases there, the Dallas County Public Defender Office and the attorneys who handle death penalty cases there, the federal habeas units that are based here in Texas and those salaries, but also looked at several other public defender offices kind of doing comparable work. And at the end of the day, the salary committee came up with a new salary structure that was competitive. And if you look at it, the salary structure that we kind of ended up with and that was proposed to RPDO's board, those salaries are not as high as, say, Dallas County Public Defender Capital Office. They're not as high as some of the folks at the Attorney General Office. So it's still a little bit low. But I think it's certainly more competitive than it was. And I think would put RPDO in better standing in order to recruit and retain attorneys. The reason that this is so pressing at this point is after 13 years of not having any kind of salary structure, and in fact having salaries that are not really competitive, we find ourselves at a point where RPDO has approximately 1/3 of its attorney positions vacant. So 5 out of 16 attorney positions are currently not filled. That's starting to have some pretty big effects on their ability to handle death penalty representation in the 185 counties where they provide representation. So there is a proposed salary structure. One of the issues I just want to flag that came up in the committee, as we talked about this last week, was to do that across the board for RPDO and its 52 employees was kind of a big leap to do it on one fell swoop. And so you'll see 3 different options in your meeting book. One is the original recommendation to fund all of that transition to the new salary structure all in one fell swoop. But RPDO also has presented 2 other options. One is to phase that in over 2 years, and the other is to phase that in over 3 years. We have with us today Ray Keith, who is the director of the Regional Public Defender Office. We also have David Clayton, who's a board member at RPDO. And we have, I think Judge Kelly Moore, who is for about 10 years was the chair for our PDO. So Ray and Judge Moore and David, I'm happy to turn it over to you all. I don't know if you have any things that you want to add to that.
Jeff, I'll go ahead and say a few things if it's okay. In looking at the members of the commission, I think I know about half of you and probably half of you I don't know. I want to be respectful of your time, but I want you to know where I'm coming from. I practiced criminal defense for 13 years and took appointments. In fact, my first murder trial I got paid $500 for the representation. And that was not a lot of money even back in 1983, even though some people may think it was. Then I was a trial judge for over 20 years. And so I managed the responsibility at that time for trying to find and recruit lawyers who would accept court appointments and provide good representation for criminal defendants. I did that for 20 years. For almost 20 years, I was the regional presiding judge for the 9th region. And the 9th region, according to the current map, all of the counties in the 9th administrative region, there's 45 of them, are members of the RPDO. And then finally, I took about a year hiatus and was executive director of the Lubbock Private Defender's Office. So like it or not, my career has more or less involved indigent defense. I want to say a couple of things. Our biggest problems during the 10 years or so that I was chair over at RPDO, at least the ones that required our attention, related to staffing. Judges don't want to have excuses. They want lawyers, and they want them representing the clients, and they want them there and available for the trials. And the times that we had our most strenuous conversations related where we were spread too thin. And it's pretty easy to see that with 5 positions vacant out of 16, the lawyers are spread really thin right now. And so something needs to be done about it. I'm not here to talk about specific dollar amounts because I'm here for big picture. And I don't know about the comparisons that have been done with Dallas County and the others, but I do know that you're looking at the RPDO is a jewel. It's been confirmed by the PPRI. It's been confirmed by lots of national studies that it is a jewel. And it, to me, is about the only way that effective representation can be given in rural counties in death penalty cases. And so the question is, where do we go from here? And I urge you to consider doing whatever it takes for them to be able to recruit and retain qualified attorneys, because in the 9th region, there are no attorneys qualified for first chair death penalty work on the list that's maintained by the regional presiding judge. And that's a big area to have no attorneys who still feel like it's worth their time and effort to maintain competent in death penalty cases. And then one other thing I want you to point out, I lived through, and I see Sherry Raddick and Missy to a certain extent. We lived through, and Judge Keller, we lived through about a 10-year drought with our salaries back in the day when we were judges. And we went a long time without pay increases. And Chief Justice Heck there, he knows that they were able to quantify a lot of the losses to the judiciary that came from being so stagnant in salaries and the loss of education and experience that came with it. And of course, we were never able to quantify the loss of possible judges or other people who were discouraged from coming into the judiciary because of the pay scale. And so I would like you to kind of compare that in a way to what RPDO is going through right now. And that's a reason in my book to take a big leap and try to fund it the way that so it can attract the most qualified people to work for it. And I thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I'd like to say something if it's okay. This is Sherry Raddick. We discussed this, quite a while in the subcommittee meeting, and one thing that Jeff brought out, which kind of I've thought about it since our meeting, that this is not really necessarily recurring, because some of the other public defender's office in the different districts have taken into account by looking at the salaries that are commensurate with in their district. And so this is kind of a outlier. And so my delay in voting came about from my thinking about that. And I believe that this is not a necessarily recurring thing. So I would be willing to vote for it now.
I'd like to say something also. So, when we did meet, I started looking at this and I was, amazed that we had lost and a third of the people for the attorneys. And so I really started looking at it after I got done with my PJ meeting. And I wanted to kind of point something out. I don't doubt that every single one of these people deserves raises. I'm with you on all of that. I think they do yeoman's work and I'm 100% behind them. My issue is if we are losing attorneys, if we are 5 out of 16 not filled, if you look at it and you look at those charts that are attached to your book, the associate public defender, the bottom would be 85 and the top would be 91. Those individuals, unless they're incredibly lucky, have $150,000, $175,000 still of student loans, or obviously they've probably paid those off, right? But they spent a lot of money to become lawyers. And then I looked at the investigators, and the investigators lowest is 80 and highest is 85. So if we're losing attorneys, I think I would be incredibly disheartened if I was an attorney and, I'd spent all of this money on law school and, gotten and my bar license is on the line. And then the investigators are basically making what I'm making. And then the senior investigator is 90 to 104. So the senior investigator is going to be making more than an attorney. Mitigation specialists, and they probably have more degrees. That's 85 to 91, and a senior mitigation is 96 to 110. So that's my only issue with this is it seems that if we are losing attorneys, my thing is to almost not turn it upside down, but I think you've got to bring those lower attorneys up, because if I'm going to lunch with my investigator or because it's public, I can go and find out that my investigator is making $10,000 more than I am. That's disheartening for an attorney, I would think. So that's my 2 cents on that. Again, I'm completely, I think RPDO does the yeoman's work. I think they do an amazing job. And so that's my only comment on this. If anybody can answer that for me or just give me something.
I think Ray Keith can address that, Judge.
Judgmentary, one, thank you to Chair Judge Keller for the opportunity to be here and speak to the commission. Judgmentary, what I would direct you to in that grid is that those associate public defenders is a new position that was created fairly recently. And those are attorney positions for young lawyers. The RPDO obviously cannot hire folks right out of school to go into the courtroom and handle death penalty cases. So the associate public defender position was created to allow us to compete for top flight law students or young attorneys with a year or two of experience and have them grow up in the RPDO in defender culture. And so those associate defenders are not the attorneys that are working directly. They don't have first chair, if you will, responsibility on capital cases. The assistant public defenders, that line item, where the range for an assistant public defender starts at $125,000. Those are the line attorneys that are handling these cases. And the senior assistant public defender is a second path where those assistants could be promoted to in the future. And so that I just wanted to kind of clarify that the line attorneys that are handling the cases directly are the ones that are assistant public defenders.
And
I don't
those,
know.
and those line attorneys, Ray, are those the ones that you were missing out? Is that the 5 out of the 16? Is that where that's coming from?
That's correct, Judge. The associate defenders, right now, we have one associate defender. And so we are hoping to add another about a year from now. But they are the line attorneys are where you have 16 slots and 5 vacancies, and that is the assistant public defender category.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ray. I really appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Thank you, Judge. And I'm happy to answer any other of the commissioner's questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
please go ahead.
I was just going to ask just a little information for myself. Is this program sponsored by TIDC annually? And is it also, I think I'm seeing some numbers coming from the locals. How is it funded and the sustainability of any of this? I appreciate that.
Yeah, so TID, that's a good question, Commissioner. Yeah, we fund, TIDC funds 2/3 of the budget. And then the 185 counties that participate in the program, each of them fund the other 1/3 collectively. And so the RPDO, and I think Ray could speak to it with more specifics about the formula, but essentially there's a formula that takes into consideration the kind of the county size and number of capital cases, and that determines every participating county's 1/3 that they pay into it.
Okay.
So as we're increasing the cost of the program, the sustainability is always a concern, both at for our entity, but also for those locals that would then be required to put in that additional 1/3 of the increase. So what is that, and have they all voted to do that? Just curious how that works.
Yeah, and I think Ray can talk to some of the specifics on that, but basically for in the near term, that 1/3, they do have some funds and reserves for that 1/3, and basically the county's portion would be covered by those reserves. After that, there would be an increase for the counties. And Ray, does that hit, I think, a couple of years from now? Is that accurate?
Yes. So the way it would work, we are in the renewal period right now for counties. And so the RPDO, the Local Government Corporation's Board of Directors, decided that we were not going to change the county contributions at this time. And so 2 years from now, when we enter the next biennium, there will be a revision to the county contribution. And that will consist of the new census data for population, the updated capital case history that is reported to the Office of Court Administration. And so the formula amounts for each county will change at that time. What is proposed in these requests involves the RPDO using a significant amount of money. I believe it's listed in your material of the amount of money that will be taken from our reserves that will cover the county impact for this biennium. And so the adjustments will take place 2 years from now in the next biennium. And so I hope I'm answering your question, but for this period, the RPDO will draw upon from its reserve funds to fund that 1/3 share that would be normally met by the counties.
So I think what you just said is that TIDC, as well as the participating counties, give money to this organization, this 501c3, and that organization has remaining funds. It hasn't spent all the money that has been contributed to it. And out of that cash bucket, they're going to pay for the increase of these salaries and any other increase in the costs. And then we would go back to our participation. But right now, TIDC is asked to put in more and cover the county's 1/3, or is that accurate?
I think I can be helpful here, Ray, if I could just
Sure.
chime in real quick. So yeah, the program has always maintained a fund balance because of the nature of their litigation and when they were created, their unusual structure, and they wanted to make sure they had about a quarter or so, or between a quarter and a half a year of operating funds if there were some challenges related to county participation declining unexpectedly. And they obviously have very serious commitments to handle their existing cases. So that's why they maintain a fund balance. The part of the reason that there is available fund balance that wouldn't put them below the target is because they've had so many open positions. And so which is exactly or at least a big part of the problem that this proposal is trying to address. So one of the ways to think about the use of some of the funds in the fund balance to finance the implementation of this new structure would be that those are savings in large part from positions that were open because of this attrition.
Okay, let me add something here because the committee I talked about this at the committee meeting. The reason we haven't seen something like this before is because we just started sustainability grants not very long ago, within the last couple of years. So if a public defender office wanted to give a raise, it just did. And the next time they asked us to fund a part of the office, then we looked at it and we funded it or we didn't. But now that we have decided that we want to support this kind of office with pay 2/3 of their cost, we have now this request for salary increases. And I agree with everyone who says that the attorneys need and the staff need salary increases. But my concern is two. One is that since we haven't done this before, and I don't think we want to be in the business of deciding salary increases every time a public defender office wants to give them, that I think the staff should come up with a structure or a plan that we can apply to public defender offices when they ask for funding or when they ask for, they can give the staff increases whether we fund them or not. They can charge them to the counties or pay for them out of whatever funds they have. But I would like to see some kind of methodical way that we can address these requests and treat the public defender offices the same and not have to think every time somebody asks for an increase whether they deserve it or not. The other thing, and I agree with Chief Justice Raddick that this is different in a way. This is different because there haven't been people have gotten raises, but there's been no methodical system for giving raises over the past 13 years or so. The RPDO has been in existence.
Did you talk to anybody about sending somebody over here?
I'm sorry? Okay. And the other thing is $517,000 is a lot of money to add to this grant every year. And I may be misremembering, but I think some of the raises under this proposal would be up to $30,000. And that is a lot of money. That's a big raise. So what I'm thinking is that we might want to ask staff to come back in 3 months with a plan or several plans that we can look at and adopt and apply to all the public defender offices and other offices that all of the offices that we use sustainability grants for. I think the committee the committee that Jeff and Ray were on that came up with the comparables did a great job, and I'm not questioning that at all. But I want to be able to do the same thing every time we get a request instead of going through the details of the request. So that's what I would propose. And there is no committee motion on this. So let's just go ahead and see if there's a motion to, well, there are 3 motions. There are 3 options on motion 14. Is there a motion?
Those refer just so people can see them and tie them to it. Pages 48 and 49 reflect the 3 options that were proposed. If people want to look at those.
And I will
so
say
is it the same? So I'm sorry, Judge. I was just going to say, is it in total? Is it the same amount? We're just front loading it or not, or is it? They are actually different salary amounts for each option.
The difference between options 1, 2, and 3 would be option 1 would be to implement the new salary structure in FY 2022 entirely. Option 2 would be to phase in the same salary structure, but just break it up into 2 steps over 2 years. And option 3 would be to implement the same salary structure, but stepping it up 1/3, 2/3, 3/3 over 3 years. That's the difference. And then so yeah.
I was going to say, Judge Keller, you have pause with saying yes to this whole thing, it sounds like. And so if we were to do one of the option 2 or 3, I think we're all in agreement that we need to get more money that direction, but instead of saying yes to it all right now, I'm concerned about sustainability. I'm always concerned about that because it's a big amount, and you're concerned about, and I am too, and having a model that can be followed, so it's not it's more understandable by us as well as those participating in as the attorneys. If we did option 2 or 3, it would give us some time to look at that and evaluate it, perhaps. Just a thought.
I agree. My hesitation, I thought that all 3 of these options included an agreement to award the total $517,000 eventually. If they don't, I don't have any problem with bumping up the salaries now and then considering how much higher they need to go under a new model.
If I could, Judge, the impact to the grant, the TIDC grant under each option, in each option, there's a line, total amount funded by commission. So that 517 figure would be for the initial year based on using some of the fund balance related to open positions of it that was available. But that amount changes and goes up in each of those models. So what you would want to look at to see under these various proposals, what TIDC would be contributing. And that's why we asked them to kind of show it over several years. You would look at the line in each of the proposals that says total amount funded by commission. So that goes up, and it's under these proposals, and it just goes up at different rates and kind of hits TIDC at different rates.
So I don't understand. Go ahead, Chief.
I was going to say, I don't understand how we're going to develop a model because the comparables, they're only with the sustainability program, not with the other RPDOs around the state. So how are we going to model for comparables?
I think it's a 2-step process. One is determine what the salaries ought to be now. And RPDO, and that's why I'm saying RPDO is different because there have been raises. They are not under any particular structure, but in the Kerr County motion, that's the next thing up on the agenda, they do have a structure. They have a structure of how people can, and it's laid out in the book about how people can expect to get raises and how they can move from one level to the next. And that's what I'm talking about. And yeah, it is different because we're talking about a big jump to get the RPDO in the position it needs to be in right now. I still don't understand option 1, option 2, option 3. What I'm looking at is option 2 is $7.3 million and increase the improvement grant by 148. I don't know what that means.
Judge, I think I understand it's kind of hard to follow the different options, but let me just try to offer this high level overview of what is proposed and the differences. In the first option, they would plot the existing staff on the grids that are in the meeting book that are in this new schedule, and basically they would begin to fully fund those revised salaries. That would be financed in part by drawing down some reserves, in part by an increase in the TIDC grant. And then in the subsequent biennium, the county contributions would have to increase to get back to 1/3 of the difference. In option 2, what they're proposing is to plot everybody on the grid where they belong according to the new structure, and then fund half of the difference between where they are now and where they would be on the grid. So basically half the increase in 1 year, and then in the subsequent year, fund the other half of that gap.
Okay.
And then the third option, you just divide the gap for any particular staff person between where they are now and where they are plotted on the structure, and take that step over 3 years instead of 2. So that's kind of the differences here. And then of course, in addition to those 3 models, the way that those costs are being funded has to do with a mixture of drawing down some of these available reserves because of the attrition, increases in TIDC contributions, and then eventually in a couple of years, bumping up the county contributions a little bit to cover the remaining third. So I hope that helps. I know it's a lot of numbers.
Here's my question, because I don't think it's clear from what's on the motion. If any of these options are voted out by the commission, does that mean we are committing to, over the next few years, moving up to $517,000 per year? I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Basically,
Okay.
yes. I mean, essentially what we'd be committing to is funding that salary structure that's proposed. The difference between the 3 is, the first one, do you want to go to that salary structure overnight? The second option is you phase it in 2 years, and the third is you phase it in 3 years.
Okay.
And I think that was an attempt to basically, I think Judge, you brought up a good question about, are these going to be big jumps in salaries for individuals? And basically by phasing it in options 2 and 3, you don't get as big of a jump. You get kind of a more steady.
All right. That's what I wanted to clarify. There are 2 things. One is to get back to Chief Justice Raddick's question or point that this is different. It's different in a way, but I think that when we adopted the sustainability grant idea, I wasn't thinking about this. I wasn't thinking about that every time there were salary increases, it would increase, we would be paying 2/3 of them. As I think I pointed this out at the committee meeting, we don't have to pay for anything. The RPDO can put this entire burden on the counties if it wants to, or it can put we can decide that RPDO ought to get half of this from the counties and half of it from TIDC. And that's what I want the staff to, one of the things I want the staff to look at over the next 3 months, that whether this concept that I was not thinking of when we decided to do the 2/3 sustainability grant is a good idea for salaries, or we ought to, do it a different way I don't know. I mean, that's what I want staff to look at. And back to Commissioner Covey, I would be happy to vote for an increase now and then wait for staff to come back with some overall model or plan, but not to make the RPDO staff wait 3 more months for any kind of raise. If we can agree to do that, I just don't want to authorize $517,000 a year without thinking about it in a methodical way.
Right. No, I completely agree. So on page 51 of the book, it looks like the pay structure that is being proposed for each different category of attorney, and with steps. So a grade, if you will, by type of attorney, and then steps that they could promote each year. I don't know who makes that decision. I don't know if that's automatic. So in 8 years, they're at the top of the grade. I don't know, but it's difficult to have decisions at our level combined with decisions at the county level for things that move. If we have an agreement at the beginning and we say, okay, we're going to pay X and the counties are going to pay Y, and that's an agreed upon deal, we know, because I'm talking about both my hats right now. Okay. If we agree to something and we're paying 2/3 and the counties have not agreed to pay the additional increase in 1/3, then that's a problem. That's a problem for sustainability. And the second point I want to make is, where is the problem we're having? And I think the problem is at the lower levels, getting attorneys to commit to doing this type work, perhaps. I think that's what I'm hearing. If I'm wrong, correct me. And so one other option would be to increase the salaries for those that we need to fill in. If those open spots are all at the base level, then we could increase those levels right now or vote to do that. And then and then as you're talking about, Judge Keller, have the plan implemented over time, perhaps for the other. But I'm just concerned because I know at our county level, when we increase salaries, it's a commitment forever, and it's only going to go up. So are we committed to doing that every time and every few years? We're just saying this is the initial thing that we're trying to either say 1 year one, or we're going to spread the initial impact over 2 or 3 years. But what about in the future, as these people move up the ladder in this pay scale, what is the impact financially to that?
Commissioner, I think Ray Keith can answer a large part of that. And then I think it looked like David Slayton had a comment as well. But Ray, do you want to address some of the commissioner's questions?
Sure. And I have the attorney page of the grid in front of me, and I assume that everyone else does. So what I would say is that in practice, the way this would work, at least as is contemplated by the corporate board of directors, is that each year the board will make a decision whether or not to authorize step movement from step 1 to 2 or 3 to 4, whatever it may be. And they would make, it's not a given that they will authorize that. It turns on budget decisions. It turns on the ability, if costs have to be passed along to counties, or if grant request modifications have to be made. And so the corporate board of directors would make a decision whether or not to authorize. And if they authorize that, then the leadership team in the RPDO would make determinations based upon merit as to whether or not any position, not just the attorneys that are seen here, but whether those positions based upon merit, they should advance in a step. And so what I would say is, in terms of hiring, the grid that is in front of the commissioners is essentially attempting to allow us to compete for the type of attorneys that we need. Because ultimately, to be an assistant public defender, that second category, you have to have significant felony trial experience. And that equates to years, and that probably means seniority. In some other existing public defender organization, that means a successful private practice where you have reached the level of skills and experience to do this work. And so that's who we have to recruit and attract for that assistant PD's position. Our long-term goal is to develop our associate public defender position to where those young lawyers grow up in our system and they become the assistant public defenders, to reduce our need to hire laterally. I mean, we will always have to hire laterally, but ultimately that's the long-term vision here. And so what I would say is that there is no guarantee of step movement, because that's ultimately a board decision that they would make. And so the 8 steps at assistant public defender and senior assistant public defender contemplate a career path of anywhere between 16 to 24, 25 years. You're talking about a significant amount of time. If the board authorized step movement each year, which I doubt would happen, but if they did that, then you are talking about a 16-year process if the individual merited a step movement every year. And that, I hope that addresses the question, and I'm happy to follow up if I did not answer the question.
No, you did. It's not an automatic step at any means. And so I think what we're just trying to figure out is, what are we saying yes to? What is the total impact, not just now, and if we break it up into 1, 2, or 3 years, but what is the future impact to the organization? Is this something that we're going to forever contribute 2/3 to, and what does that look like? And can the counties keep up their end of the 1/3? So I think that's where you're hearing the concern from me anyway.
This is Alex Bunnan, and as somebody who's run public defender offices for 25 or more years, I think what Ray's trying to say is he's got 2 problems. One is retention, which a delayed increase would probably be okay, because people will go, okay, I'm not getting the full raise this year, but I know it's coming. But he also has to bring in new folks. And I don't think that really helps him with that. If he can't post jobs that pay the salaries that are going to attract people to even get involved in this, he's not going to ever get ahead on that. And he doesn't need just new lawyers, he needs experienced lawyers. So to help him right now, he needs to be able to hire people at higher salaries.
Alex, does the Harris County PD's office have some kind of salary pay scale structure?
We do. Initially, what we've always done is follow the district attorney's office as a model scale. But we also have our own entry level of qualifications and things like. It's not quite as structured as what he's got right there, but it is a structure.
Okay. And did David Slayton want to say something?
Sure. Thanks, Judge Keller. If it's okay, I may ask a question of Mr. Keith. Jeff did mention I serve as an ex officio member of the LPDO board. I just want to be clear about that, but I did miss the last meeting, so I don't actually have inside scoop on this information. So, Ray, is the $517,000, is that to get everybody to step one, or is there an intention to bring people in at different steps based upon current level of experience?
It contemplates people stepping in at different levels. And so there's a variety there, and the leadership team has met and have made kind of preliminary decisions on our PDO staff so that we could provide essentially the range to our CFO so that she could calculate prospective budget numbers so that they all would slot in different places. Just by way of example, we have really one attorney who would qualify as a senior assistant public defender, and the remainder will be on the assistant public defender level at this time. And there's a wide variety on that.
Judge Keller, and members, I think the delicate balance here is trying to give the leadership team of the regional public defender the discretion to pay people what they feel is necessary to run the organization on a daily basis, to give the oversight board the authority to set out the policy. I think the question for the commission is not whether you or I think these salaries make sense. I think the question is whether or not the commission is willing to fund the request. That's ultimately the question, because I think to get into deciding whether or not employee A deserves this raise or this amount may get a little bit too into the minutia and the operation of the office. I think the question is whether or not, and maybe this is what Commissioner Covey was asking, is whether the commission is willing to pay this amount of money and then sustain that over time. I think it's also incumbent upon the oversight board to really think about the impact on the counties. It's really their issue and whether or not that will be sustainable. But I think ultimately the question I think the commission ought to be thinking about is, the bottom line question is, do you want to, are you willing to commit to paying this amount of money, and then leave the salary determination up to the leadership of RPDO and the oversight board as to actually how, who should be paid what. At the end of the day, they're the ones having to deal with the issues on the ground. They know which positions are more difficult to recruit for. Ray will know when he interviews somebody for a job where their criteria allow them to fit on the scale. So I think to me, that seems to be the issue, which is it's really just a question of funding. It's not a question of whether or not you or I think these raises are appropriate or not, in my opinion. It's really more the money issue.
I think that's what it ought to be. Yeah, I do. I don't want to be picking around at who should be making what. But
could I say
Kelly, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
The sustainability grants are subject to the budget appropriation by TIDC, correct? They're not forever.
Well, I guess what we communicate to counties is that the current policy for certain types of programs is that TIDC funds them at 2/3 on an ongoing basis under current policy. But there, yeah, I think what you're kind of getting at is you all could change the policy.
Well, I think we changed it a couple of years ago, what we contributed to the RPDO, did we not?
We did.
Yes, we used to contribute 50% and then the
Yeah,
board
so
changed
so,
it.
so it's not forever. Is that
Yes,
correct?
if you change policy, it would,
Right. Mhm.
yes.
And of course, there is going to be a huge impact potentially on counties. We run out of fund balance, but one capital murder trial will bankrupt a small county. So it's a good, we pay dues, and it's a good insurance policy. But we have to, I think we have to have it for the rural counties.
I think the alternate view of that is at some point, these attorneys are probably going to have to be paid more to be able to sustain the program. And if the commission does not fund it, then it's going to be solely on the counties to pay for it. Because at some point, in the future, there will have to be raises provided to attorneys. And it's a question of whether or not the commissions and the state are going to pick up the 2/3 of that, or if all of that will fall upon the counties that are members of the RPDO.
This is one time, this will benefit 180 counties.
Well, it wouldn't, back to what David was saying, it wouldn't necessarily fall on all the counties equally, because there's some kind of formula, I don't know what it is, that includes the charges counties more if they have more capital murder cases. So there might be some counties that didn't bear much of a burden at all, where the ones who are using it a lot bore more of a burden, but that would be up to the RPDO to decide how to split the cost of increasing salaries.
Yeah, we just got our bill to include in our budget, so we're keeping aware of that.
Okay.
And then presumably it sounds like the way that the RPDO is looking at doing this is, counties will have a choice in 2 years. If they don't like the increased costs associated with this, they could choose not to participate. Now, as obviously sometimes counties are kind of in a, they pretty much have to, but they would have that choice if they wanted to push back or have issues, they could, because it sounds like they will be upon the next renewal when that cost will be passed on to them, and they will then have a choice whether or not to get in or not.
Right, and we don't want counties to drop out. We want to keep as many counties in as we can, and we want the program to be a success. But I don't know what the individual counties, what the increase is going to be. And does the RPDO know that, what it'll be in 2 years? Or is that just too far off?
I mean, the numbers are projected out in each of the models, Judge, in terms of county contribution, TIDC contribution. Obviously that's in the aggregate. If you look at the various tables, you see that that the balance, basically the balance of what TIDC is not funding would be the increase that the counties would be expected to absorb after 2 years.
Are you looking at the book?
On page 48. So, and
no, I was talking about the individual counties.
Oh, I see. I apologize. I was just thinking in general the amount that would be spread around. But.
Okay.
Judge Keller, if I might.
Yes.
I think that we had done back, I'm going to guess 4 or 5 months ago, and I don't have those numbers. I apologize. I don't have them in front of me. We had done a preliminary look at what the census, because the formula is population and capital case history. And then there was discussion, at least at that time, among the committee that was working on this as to whether or not that formula was going to be adjusted in the future. But the two variables that are subject to being revised, at least for certain, 2 years from now, would be that capital case history when we get those numbers provided by OCA, and then the finalized census data, the population for each county. As of right now, there are very small counties, low population, little to no capital case history. They're minimum, they pay $1,000 a year. And so I would expect that the input numbers going into the formula will change. And depending on the board's decisions, they may choose to look at the formula in toto.
Okay, so it's too early.
I think Judge Keller's question though, Ray, has anyone run the numbers given the existing formula? So if let's say population didn't change and capital murder cases didn't change and you're using the existing formula, and you were to add the budget increase that would be passed on to the counties from this, what would, say, Lubbock County's cost versus, Loving County's costs go up? Has anybody run those numbers? I think that's the question she's asking.
I don't know. I don't believe that has been run that way, David. I partially would punt to Edwin in terms of the county, what the projected county participation would look like in the future, but I don't think it's been done on a county by county basis.
Yeah, I think we would be looking at full funding of your request somewhere around less I think 575,000 would be the county share at full funding in the out years, allocated among all the participating counties. About 575,000 among how many counties? About 185 counties.
Judge Keller, I think Judge Moore had a comment or question.
Okay, Judge.
Okay, just real quickly, I think there's a lot of, and I can understand the concern about opening up the floodgates or having to look at each individual entity and their salary structures. This is one way to look at it. You're funding a new animal here because this is a new corporation unbound by the shackles of the Lubbock County limitations that were holding them back anyway. And so you're not going to be looking at them coming to you each year with this kind of novel request. I don't think it's almost like you're funding a new entity because they have more flexibility to get the kind of lawyers that they need. And so if another group comes to you next year and all they're wanting is a salary increase, I would think you could differentiate it. Although I'm not the one that's going to have to be the one to differentiate it.
Thanks, Judge. Well, let's see where we stand. We haven't heard from a lot of people, so I really don't know which way you're leaning. So let me just see if there is a motion, any kind of motion to revise the FY22 program budget for the RPDO.
I move that we adopt option 3. I can't read the rest of it, sorry.
Is there a second? And that means agree to increase it by $517,866, but over a 3-year period. Is that what you're?
And I'm
okay.
hoping that in the interim, we will have more input from the staff regarding a model that you laid out earlier.
Judge, can I just clarify? Option 3 would not involve increasing the award because that first part of phase-in would be covered by the fund balance, the excess fund balance from the attrition. So if you look at page 3 on page 49 of your meeting book, and you look at the amount that says increase in amount funded by commission at the bottom of the table, you'll see that impact from the commission it extends over time. So there wouldn't be any change to their current award, but what you would be doing here is approving this budget change to be phased in over 3 years. And then we would fund, part of the increase is funded by excess fund balance in the first few years, but that, that goes up over time. So you would want to look at that bottom line of the 3-year phase-in to see the impact on TIDC, but it would not involve augmenting the FY22 award in place now.
So I have a question to clarify this, Valerie Kobe. So if we're doing the third one and we're just basically talking about total amounts, the board could put most of the money where the problem actually is in hiring new people and keeping people employed that are there. In other words, it doesn't have to give large increases to the upper folks that are going to stay around, and really target the money to the problem that you've tried to address.
David, wouldn't that be up to the board to decide?
I would think that that was sort of what I was pointing to earlier. You might be, I might consider, you might want to consider whether that's overstepping the authority of the commission and sort of getting down into the management. I mean,
No. What I'm suggesting is that we don't have to make that decision. What we're saying is that we support more money because we have an issue that we agree needs to be solved by putting more money to it. We're funding it over a 3-year period, but we don't have to make those decisions about where actually what position that money goes to. The board of the 501c3 could make that decision, or whoever, the staff, the director, or whoever could make that decision to actually. My concern is that if we fund it over a time period, are we going to be able to really address the issue of getting more money to fill these spots? But if they can make that determination where the funding goes, and we don't have to, but they do, great. That might solve the problem. I'm asking that. I don't know how that would work.
Sounds like if you all went with option 3, which is the motion on the table, I think, then during year 1, the oversight board would draw, and the leadership of the office would draw from reserves and begin implementing the salary increase and addressing and targeting where that is needed. And the oversight board would have the authority, and the leadership would have the authority to do that. In year 2, presumably they'll come back to you all and ask for additional funds to cover the year 2, step 2 of that. And then year 3, come back to you for the final, amounts to do that. But I think Commissioner, what you're saying would be possible under option 1, and the whole funding would be coming from the reserves, not from TIDC.
David, I think all that's correct, but I think we're referring to option 3 though.
Yeah, that's I think what the motion is.
Yeah, sorry, I think you said option 1 there, but yeah. Otherwise, exactly, I think that's exactly right.
So I have a question also with Judge Keller talking about getting something from the staff in the future. If we vote 1, 2, or 3, are we locking ourselves into or setting precedent for the future or for all the other things that we're going to be doing, or does that not matter and we're not locking ourselves in?
Yeah, well, what I would say we're only locking ourselves in is to the RPDO, and I think the RPDO is I think in our minds we've talked about it quite a bit on the staff side. I think it's qualitatively different. We fund it a little bit differently. It covers 185 counties. Death penalty work, the salary structures are different. They're coming from a place where they haven't had a salary structure for 13 years, whereas most of these sustainability grants are public defender offices that we've helped design. And we may see, of course, whatever kind of line of work you're in, whether it's a hardware store or a beauty salon or anything else, costs go up. But in most of those places, we're talking about 1 or 2 or 3% a year. And I think it's stuff that we can come up with a plan for all the other public defender offices where we have sustainability grants. I think we view RPDO as a very different kind of animal.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief Justice Raddick has moved to adopt option 3. Is there a second?
Wow.
Okay. Are there any, well, I didn't hear a second, so I'm going to move on. Are there any other motions related to the FY22 program budget for the RPDO?
I would move we adopt option 1.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 You know what? Can you all tell who's voting aye? I know Chief Justice Raddick and Alex did.
Do you want to have Megan call the roll on the votes?
Yeah, let's do that.
Megan, can you call the votes, please, and just one by one? Oh, Megan, are you there?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me get the roll sheet. Mr. Alex Bunnan.
Voted for.
He seconded motion 1. Judge Keller?
No.
Moved. Judge Baderi?
Can you come back to me? I really like option 2. I
You
really like
option
option 2.
Okay.
I'm going to vote no on 1.
Commissioner Kobe?
I'm torn also. I think that we need more funding, and I'm not sure that it matters really. If we fund it all in 1 year, in year 1, it is, we've committed. If we spread it out, we have potentially options, but I think we're still committed. So I'll vote yes.
Mr. Rios?
Yes.
Judge Evans?
Yes.
Chief Justice Hack?
Oh,
Torres isn't here. Chief Raddick?
I vote yes.
Am I missing anybody? Representative Smith, I assume that he came in.
He just had to leave.
Is there anyone else that I missed? I think that's it.
Okay, it looks like it's 5 yeses and 3 nos. Is that what you got?
Yes.
Okay, so we will revise the FY22 program budget for the RPDO according to option 1 on motion 14, and increase the improvement grant award by $517,866 to a total of $7 million. Is that right? That's the total, $7,951,126.
That's correct, Judge.
Okay, thank you everybody for all your input and discussion on this. Let's move on.
Thank you. And we're also on the staff side, we'll take the direction to come to you with some policy suggestions at the next meeting in this area.
Okay.
So the next item on the agenda is another grant modification request, this one from Kerr County for the Hill Country Regional Public Defender Office. This is a new office that was set up this year. They got started in January. It's covering 5 counties in the Hill Country region. Kerr County is the host county, that administrative and fiscal agent for the county. It also has been very successful in its launch and has pretty much fully, I think there's one position that might not be fully staffed, but it's been fully staffed up and fully operational. The office is the largest county operated rural regional public defender that TIDC is involved in setting up. The program is requesting a budget adjustment to adjust the award from 1.527 million to 1.790 million, as seen on the sheet there. Staff requested additional detail when we got the original request from Judge Kelly in Kerr County. And we met with members of the program oversight board, including Judge Evans, who serves on that board as county judge of Bandera County, one of the participating counties, as well as the chief public defender, to talk through and really understand the request better. And really what it boils down to from our perspective is that these proposed changes reflect the difference between the projections and the estimates that were rooted in TIDC's planning study and the actual cost of implementation. Most of the costs are associated with higher personnel costs, particularly for attorneys qualified to handle higher level felonies. The program has seen a surprising number of appointments in capital murder cases, non-death penalty capital murder cases, that was not anticipated or projected. And so in their hiring for the felony positions, in order to avoid the chief and the deputy chief being overwhelmed with murder case representation, really had to bring in some more seasoned folks at the felony level. Also, there were some higher than estimated office space costs. The program did provide some good detail in terms of comparable rental costs, and we believe that the proposed rental costs are appropriate and just more than the estimate that is based on a very high level number that TIDC used in the planning study. Finally, there's some operational costs that just weren't in the planning study or were missed in the planning study that related to office phone system, the Lexus subscription, and some higher expenses on the case management software. We looked at all those quite carefully and believe that everything is necessary and appropriate. But just again, the gap between theory and practice and kind of implementing the program based on our planning, I think that's how we characterize the change. And then there were some minor adjustments for benefits costs associated with health insurance changes, which were more routine. So this is the second year of the program. The one piece that is different from the cost changes that I have just been discussing is that they also are proposing $50,000 to support a new public defender intern program that would pay a modest stipend to, I believe the proposal is 5 interns to support the program. The staff talked with the chief public defender about this and really believes that it would create a new avenue that is much needed to develop young attorneys willing to work in rural public defense in Texas. And so we are supporting that, but I did want to kind of separate that out from the other proposed increases because it is a different and really new dimension of the program that we haven't done in this way before. So $50,000 of the proposal is associated with that. The staff recommendation is to provide funding. We do have with us today Commissioner Letts from Kirk County, who can speak briefly about the award. Commissioner Letts, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. And Judge Keller, thank you, and the commission. Overall, we're just very, very happy with the progress of the PDO. It took a little bit of work getting everything going and coordinated between 5 counties, but that's all I think been settled. We visited with the district judges. They seem very happy with the progress. So I'm really here just to answer any questions you have.
Thanks for coming. I'll just try to short circuit this. My only concern is with the interns. My experience has been that the interns that I've had at the court, the program we have is more for their benefit than for our benefit. There are schools that provide interns for that we don't have to pay. And I think Jeff, did you tell me that SMU is starting a new one?
That's correct, Judge. I think they're looking to expand that, pardon me, to multiple counties. Yeah. And I think if memory serves, and Commissioner Letts may know, I think one of the SMU interns might have been with Hill Country PDO this past summer.
That's correct. And as I understand it, I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to speak a little bit just from talking to our chief. But the idea is that I guess schools do pay or help supplement interns. This would not be in addition to that funding. This would primarily be for, second or third year law students. And it's a way to try to get them exposure to the rural counties and hopefully get them to feed right into our PDO program. We have contacts both with St. Mary's Law School and SMU through our chief and our assistant chief. And they think this is a good program to bring people in on the low end. They get a little bit of experience. They feel they did have some interns come that were unpaid this past summer, and they felt they got it was a very good benefit to the program.
Okay. I still think that's a little bit outside of our core function. And I understand that it's important to get attorneys in the rural areas and that this is a good way to do it. I'm not sure we ought to pay for it. But I'm fine with the other part of the proposal. So let me see. Is there a motion to increase the FY22 improvement grant award to Kirk County by $262,734 to $1,790,074?
And Judge Keller, just to clarify, if you want to make the motion and back out the intern program, you would make that motion to increase the award by $33,334 less than what is on the motion sheet. So I think that's what you're intending to move. Is that right?
Well, I'm not moving. I'm asking if anybody else. So is there a motion to grant the award amount that's in number 15 or to grant that amount minus $33,333, in effect, taking out the money for the interns. Is there any motion either way? Well, I'll move the second one to take out the money for the interns.
And I would second it.
And for the rest. Okay.
I would second it.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I will abstain from the vote.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Judge. All right, then that carries. And
Thank you.
we'll fund it entirely except for our part of the interns.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for coming,
you. Thanks for
Commissioner.
coming.
The last item that we have, we just got the official request this morning, so it is not in the meeting materials, but if I could ask Megan or Doriana to put up the request from Hays County. We did have a placeholder page that we were expecting or anticipating this request. Hays County, the commission made an award to Hays County in FY 2020 for an indigent defense coordinator. They previously didn't have a program. And they're moving into the third of a 4-year grant. So they're at the point now where the county is paying the majority of the costs, and TIDC's contributions on the grant are tapering off in the 40s, 40%, a little more than 40% because of an adjustment in the timing. Their request is to modify the improvement grant to add an assistant indigent defense coordinator to cope with an increasing indigent defense caseload. And the letter, once you scroll down to the letter, Doriana or Megan, so the letter we received from Judge Becerra, they had been requesting this for some time, and the staff has asked for additional detail, and we've taken a look at this. The numbers do, from our perspective, warrant an assistant IDC. They've described, if you go up just a little bit, please go up just a little bit into the bottom half of the letter. But basically, they've described that they have very large amount of difficulty covering these core functions of indigent defense right there. They have a hard time covering these core indigent defense functions when the IDC has a sick day, there's already a high workload, long hours. And as I believe I mentioned at our Grants and Reporting Committee meeting or a recent meeting, Hays County is one of the fastest growing counties in the country, and their caseload has sort of ballooned. So we think it's an appropriate request. The county is funding the majority of it, and we would just modify, if you agree, we would be proposing to modify the existing awards so that TIDC would be funding about 43% of the increased cost this year, and then next year about 23% as the grant winds down. So that, again, I apologize that this was very late in arriving, and we didn't include it in the original materials, but I did want to present it to you if you are prepared to act.
Can you tell us what the motion should say if somebody wants to present a motion?
Yes, the motion would be
there it is. Modify Hays County FY 2022 award to $82,819,000.
Right.
Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Edwin. The motion carries.
Thank you all very much. I believe we're now ready to move into the Operation Lone Star requests, and let's see. Or somebody help me on where we are with the agenda. Do we need to circle back to the proposed FY 2022 budget at this juncture? I believe we do.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, so in the meeting materials, I believe we added it second place. Can you please put up the budget sheet again showing the proposed FY 22 budget? So all the awards that were, one more down, please. So the last column is again the projection for FY23, but basically the FY22 proposed budget, the second to the last column that's reflected in, and this is on page 81 of your meeting materials. reflects the awards that have already been approved today, and includes a formula grant amount of $20,500,000. So we would propose that we would ask for a motion or recommend a motion to adopt the FY 2022 budget.
Was there a committee motion on that? There was.
We have a committee motion to recommend the budgeted amount for the formula grants, but not to adopt the entire budget per se.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a regular motion because it's not completely
Okay.
a motion.
Okay, is there a motion then to adopt the is this what it is, to adopt the FY22 formula grant budget of 20.5 million? What is it, Edwin?
Yeah, what number?
It's the amount. Let's see. I'm sorry. It's motion number 18. Motion to adopt the FY22 budget as it appears on the meeting notebook on page 81.
Okay.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I'm opposed.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And then the very last item before we go on to the OLS issues is reflected there in motion 19, and that's just to direct staff to publish the formula grant request for applications. This occurs on page 82 of the meeting book and doesn't include any programmatic changes other than the adjustment to the budget that you all just considered. And we have a motion number 19 to publish the formula grant RFA.
Is there a motion to direct staff to publish the FY22 formula grant request for applications?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. But Edwin, don't we need to go back to motion number 3?
Yes, I apologize, Judge. The order of the book was a little bit different than what I had thought it was. So we also have one other item related to the GNR matters, our routine GNR matters, which is to issue the FY22 updated IDER manual, Indigent Defense Expenditure Report Manual. And if you look on page 87 of the meeting materials, you see a summary of the 3 substantive changes that the staff is proposing on page 87 of the meeting materials. Basically, we've had some confusion regarding how counties should be including case counts for capital murder cases in their IDERs. As you know, these cases stretch out over years in some cases, and there are interim payments. And so this created some challenges for the data that we were collecting. And so we just want to give uniform guidance regarding cases, including capital cases that might have interim payments and stretch across fiscal years. They should only be counting the case in the year that the case is disposed. So that's just a minor update in their reporting guidance. The second change we're proposing is to clarify how cases should be handled, the habeas corpus petitions related to people in jail when no charges are filed beyond the statutory timelines. And we just want to clarify the guidance to make sure that you don't double count a case just because a habeas petition is filed when it's really the same as the it's very closely related to the underlying criminal matter, but is technically a separate civil matter. So we don't want to double count those. So we're going to clarify the guidance there. And then lastly, we're just going to be updating the IDER to capture that data that Jeff mentioned earlier in our meeting regarding CPS appointments. And those are the 3 changes, nothing terribly controversial here, but we would have a motion to request that you direct us to issue the manual with those revisions.
Well, you never know what's going to be controversial, but is there a motion to direct staff to issue the FY21 Indigent Defense Expenditure Report Manual?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
So now I think we're ready for OLS. Is that right, Jeff?
Wait a minute. We skipped motion 3. We haven't voted on the 3rd motion, have we?
That's a committee motion. I don't think we have. Edwin?
I would ask Wesley to see if he has a record of us addressing the motion.
We did not do motion 3, although technically, as the board has already adopted the FY22 budget, it included the adoption of a $20.5 million formula grant amount. I'm not sure that's really necessary at this point.
Okay, let's move on then. Operation Lone Star. Who's going to talk about that?
I can cover that, Judge. Thank you.
Okay.
So I've already briefed the board in my director's report about Operation Lone Star. We received funds this week from the governor's office. Again, these are funds from the governor's emergency and deficiency fund, and approximately $1.9 million total that we've received. These funds don't affect don't affect our appropriation at all at TIDC and Fund 5073, and they are strictly devoted to Operation Lone Star. There are 2 motions in front of the board, one related to funding My Padilla, which would cover all Padilla services for Operation Lone Star. The other one, oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. The other one is related to the Lubbock Private Defender Office, which is handling all defense representation assignments and services for attorneys along the border. Briefly, the My Padilla services, this would be used to contract with an attorney to provide Padilla services for any attorney taking an Operation Lone Star case. And the Lubbock Private Defender, the amounts are related to a few different things. The main amount is related to attorney payments for Operation Lone Star. These funds are meant to be used for private attorneys or public defenders taking Operation Lone Star cases so that the counties won't be saddled with the costs of Operation Lone Star. In addition to that, there's a small amount that's connected to travel and a small amount connected to interpretive services. We do have Shannon Cavazos, who is the director of Lubbock Private Defender Office here. And if there are any questions, but I think that's kind of the gist of it. But happy to answer any questions you all have.
Okay. I don't see a motion. Yeah, here it is. Motion number 17. Number 16 is first, I guess. Is there a motion to award a new FY22 Operation Lone Star grant to the Capillary Private Defender Service of $41,085 for Padilla advisals?
So moved.
I'll
Is there a
second
second?
that. I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and Jeff, I'm sorry, did you already talk about the LPDO?
I did, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, that's fine. Is there a motion to increase the FY22 Operation Lone Star grant to the Lubbock Private Defender Office by up to $1,240,688 to provide direct representation, defense interpretation services, and travel expenses, and advance 25% of the grant amount immediately?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries too. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? Where are we now? Are we on fiscal monitoring report? Are we that far?
All right. Okay, well, I'll take over. If you'll turn to page 88, pages 88 to 92, I've summarized all the fiscal monitoring activities for the whole fiscal year, which is coming to an end. But just since the June meeting, I've begun one new desk review, and that was for Karnes County, and I've issued the Dallas County and the Montgomery County fiscal initial reports. I did go through the comprehensive annual financial reports and single audits on 9 additional counties. They came in this time. Anyway, and I just want to point out that the Fort Bend and Dallas County had their TIDC grants actually reviewed in their state single audits. No findings were found for Fort Bend County, but 2 issues were found for Dallas County. But the Dallas County issues were already reported by Edwin at the last meeting. The county auditors did submit, contacted us as soon as they found out there was a problem. And so we've already addressed that. So no other action is needed. I just kind of pointed out that our funds are actually getting reviewed. So I think that's interesting there. But anyway, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Deborah. Jeff, is there anything left on the agenda or are we done?
No, Judge, I think we're finished.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks to everybody for their time and the discussion over the difficult issue. And we appreciate all the work the staff done. And goodbye to Claire. And welcome to Bill Cox and
Nick Sawyer.
Nick Sawyer. Thank you. And we will see you next time. The meeting is adjourned. Bye.
Judge.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye, Claire. Thank you for all your work.